What about the next step, the storage stage? To what extent can we hold on to our memories of events? Well, let's examine some data from the sort of high-impact traumatic event that should be very hard to forget. Having a car crash. Even a minor damage-only car crash ought to be hard to forget due to the expense and inconvenience caused, let alone a crash in which people are hurt and killed. But it so happens that Jeff Maycock and colleagues of the Transport Research Laboratory in the UK found that drivers appear to forget about 30% of the car crashes they have been involved in per year. That is, if 100 drivers report having one crash during a 1-year period, then 1 year later, only about 70 of them will report that crash. In other words, 30 of them will have forgotten it. Even for crashes where people were injured, the forgetting rate was 18% per year. So it's not just minor crashes that people are forgetting. That's incredible on the face of it. How could people possibly forget something like that? We're not even talking about the details like the colour of the car that you crashed in or whose fault it was. We're talking about people forgetting that the entire event ever took place. So, the first message about memory storage is that it seems that people are surprisingly likely to forget things that we really wouldn't expect them to forget. Okay, aside from forgetting, what else can happen to memories during the storage phase? It turns out that it is startlingly easy to modify memories, both deliberately and otherwise, by introducing misinformation. That is, stored memories can be interfered with. In the real world, this might well happen just by accident. For example, listening to an inaccurate report of the crime in the media, or chatting with an eyewitness who has misremembered the original event. One thing that memory researchers are very aware of is the extent to which memory is vulnerable to tampering. In a typical experiment, people are shown a video of a crime. Then they might read a written account of the crime, such as might appear in a newspaper article. Half of the participants are fed false information via this follow-up account. For example, in the original, the criminal might be clean-shaven, but in the written account, it might be inferred that they had a moustache. Then they are asked to recall the crime, and the people who have been fed the false information often end up incorporating it into their report. For example, recalling that the criminal had a moustache when in fact he didn't. In a study from 2013, Hartmut Blank and colleagues from the University of Portsmouth showed participants a 2-minute video clip of a crime captured on CCTV. In the video, 4 men rob a jewellery store and one of them has a gun. Then participants discuss the crime with another participant who is actually a plant who had been briefed to give misinformation. An example of the misinformation they introduced was to identify the wrong person as holding that gun. The next week, participants returned and were asked to recall details of the crime. Even when they were told that the information from the other witness might be incorrect and that they should ignore it, they often still incorporated the false information into their account of the crime. Maybe it would be different if the situation was more stressful or personal. Well, in another recent study, Charles Morgan of Yale University and colleagues found that military personnel who were subjected to a highly stressful prisoner of war camp simulation, which involved them being aggressively interrogated, identified the wrong person as being their interrogator after being shown misinformation, in this case, a photograph. The research into the misinformation effect indicates that it's likely to create problems for a real crime case, where even telling eyewitnesses that a media report of a crime is inaccurate might not help prevent their memory of the crime from being contaminated. Here's an interview with Elizabeth Loftus, conducted by one of my colleagues, Matt Thompson. She's perhaps the most influential eyewitness memory researcher there is, and here's her take on false memories.
So many of us have the intuition that we see and hear and remember everything. Does our mind work like a video camera?
It definitely doesn't work like a video camera or any kind of recording device. We're not just taking in information and replaying it later. The whole process is much more complex, and actually, memory is reconstructive. We're taking bits and pieces of experience, sometimes things that happened at different times and places, and constructing our memories.
Recollecting.
When we recall something, the process is more like one of reconstruction.
Okay. So is that a perfect process? Is it fallible? How does it work?
So what happens when you go through life, you have experiences, and you may store bits and pieces of information. But later on, other things can happen. People can talk to you. You can tell people about your experiences.
Yeah.
You can be fed misinformation about the experience. And these activities can change your memory, can transform or distort your memory, so that when you try to call up a memory for a past event, you're reconstructing, and there can be lots of errors.
Okay, but surely if I'm really confident about my belief or my recollection, and it's really sincere and really emotional, surely that means it's more likely to be an accurate memory.
Well, it may be slightly more likely to be an accurate memory if you're really confident about it. But confidence is not a good indicator that your memory is accurate, because false memories can be expressed with a lot of confidence, they can be expressed with a lot of detail, they can be expressed with a lot of emotion, and so they have the same characteristics as true memories. And just relying on those characteristics can mislead people into thinking that something is real when it's not.
Is it possible to implant a false memory, make somebody believe something happened when it never actually happened?
Absolutely. And I mean, in my own work, for example, we've changed people's memories for the details of events that they did experience. We've made people, for example, believe that a car went through a stop sign instead of a yield sign, or a guy running from the scene had curly hair instead of straight hair. That's really easy to do. But you can go further with people. You can plant entirely false memories, whole memories, into the minds of people for things that didn't happen.
Wow. So surely that has implications for people testifying in court, like witnesses saying, yes, that was the guy that committed the crime, or yes, the car went through the stop sign and hit the other car. Does your research have implications for the courtroom?
It does, because most of the time little errors that we make in memory don't matter very much. I mean, it doesn't really matter if I tell you that I had a hamburger for lunch instead of chicken, but when it comes to the legal world, now very precise memory matters. And so memory evidence is precious. It needs to be preserved. It needs to be protected. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's not. And people or circumstances get in there and contaminate those memory traces and lead to travesties of justice.
Wow. Are there any famous cases of false memories?
Oh gosh, well I'm trying to figure out where I would begin with. There's certainly a lot of famous politicians who have had distorted memories, and one of my favorite ones is Hillary Clinton, who was running for the presidency of the United States when she talked about a trip that she had taken to Bosnia, and she had a very vivid recollection of landing under sniper fire on this trip. That there was supposed to be a greeting ceremony, but instead they just had to run to the base. And later, photographs were revealed of this landing in Bosnia, and it was extremely peaceful. It was lots of children there. Hillary's daughter was there, and so what's going on here? She had a distorted memory, one that resulted in a little bit of embarrassment for her because people called her Pinocchio, but she made a mistake.
Yep.
I mean, she had a false memory. And her case shows us that all that intelligence, all that experience, all that education, all that Yale Law School degree doesn't protect you from having false memories.
Cannot make those mistakes. That's interesting. Do we ever repress memories? So if there's something bad that's happened in our childhood that we might want to forget on some level, do we ever repress memories, and do they ever come back without our knowledge?
On this whole question of repression, I have to say that what we do is we sometimes don't think about things for a long time and can be reminded of them. Sometimes unpleasant experiences we don't think about for a long time and we can be reminded of them. But that is ordinary forgetting and remembering. This notion of repression, that you can take years of brutalization, banish it into the unconscious, where it's walled off from the rest of mental life, and then get in there and reliably recover it all, just no credible scientific support for this. And yet, many people have been prosecuted or sued civilly based on claims of repression and so-called de-repression.
Is it possible to tell the difference between a true and a false memory?
We haven't had very much luck doing that. I mean, we've tried looking at emotional ratings. Maybe people are more emotional about their true ratings, but that doesn't make a difference. Maybe you see different brain images if you did put people in an fMRI machine, and you'd see differences between true and false memories, but there are barely any differences. I mean, maybe true memories and false memories would persist differentially. Maybe true memories persist longer, but we don't see even evidence for that. My name is Elizabeth. I think about memory.